I was halfway through patching the fence that separated my scrapyard from the desert when I heard something crash hard enough to shake the sand out of the nails in my pockets. It wasn't thunder. Thunder doesn't wheeze. The first thing I saw when the dust cleared was purple. The second was more purple. A tall, shimmering figure was trying and failing to stand upright among a mess of metal that looked suspiciously like a ship engine. Her skin shimmered like dusk over water, her hair silver white and tangled with smoke. And she was wearing what looked like armor designed by someone allergic to fabric. I said, brilliant conversationalist that I am. Welcome to Nevada. She blinked twice, clearly dazed, then whispered hoarsely, take it off. Please, every tool in my hand froze midair. I might have even stopped breathing. Take what off? I managed. She pointed weakly at her arm, specifically at a smoking, sparking brace of alien metal that had half melted into her skin. The restraint. It burns. Oh, right. The restraint. I was fairly sure my ears were redder than her ship's warning lights. I sprinted over, dropped to one knee, and tried not to notice that the restraint was attached to someone who looked like a sci-fi calendar model had crash-landed in my front yard. Don't move, I said. This might sting. It already stings, she muttered through clenched teeth, the accent smooth but alien, every word vibrating like music. Humans are slow. Humans are careful, I corrected, prying the hot metal open with my multi-tool. We like our patience in one piece. A small spark leapt, she hissed, and I flinched back. Sorry. Her lips curved faintly. You apologize too much. Do humans always panic when touching females? Only the glowing ones, I said, before my brain could stop my mouth. She actually laughed, a soft, chime-like sound that instantly made the entire desert feel less empty. Then her knees buckled. I barely caught her before she hit the sand. Hey, easy. You're burning up. Energy low, she murmured. Must recalibrate. Her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in my arms. Now, I don't know if you've ever held an unconscious alien princess while standing in a scrapyard surrounded by suspiciously radioactive debris. But it does things to your anxiety levels. Mostly makes them explode. I carried her inside my workshop, laid her on my bench, and immediately began wondering if this counted as first contact or kidnapping. The shop was cluttered with half-disassembled bots, engine parts, and one very judgmental cat that chose this exact moment to hop onto the counter and stare at me like, "So this is your type, huh?" "Don't start, Pixel," I muttered. She crash-landed. The cat blinked. Fine, yes, she's kind of pretty. But she's also maybe radioactive, so calm down. The alien stirred. A low hum filled the room, soft light pulsing beneath her skin. I took one step back, mostly to avoid spontaneous combustion. She opened her eyes slowly, pupils glowing faint blue. Where am I? Earth, junk lot. I'm Kale. She frowned slightly, scanning the room. Primitive architecture. Crude tools, yet cozy. Thanks, I said. I aim for post-apocalyptic chic. She sat up too fast, wincing as the damaged brace on her arm sparked again. I reached instinctively and she froze, staring at my hand like it was some strange artifact. You would touch me? She asked quietly. Well, yeah. You're hurt. In my culture, she said, eyes narrowing. Touch implies a certain intimacy. I choked on my own breath. Oh, well, here it just means first aid. She tilted her head. First aid? Your people flirt by pretending to heal? Definitely not flirting, I said quickly. Unless you count CPR training day. Her mouth twitched. Curious species. I pried the last bit of metal from her arm. She didn't even flinch. When it came free, a strange glow faded from her veins, leaving faint patterns that looked like starlight. Done, I said. You're free. She flexed her fingers experimentally. Efficient. Then softly. Thank you, human Kale. You're welcome, Thyra, she said. Captain Thera of the Astral Vanguard. Cool. So, Captain Thera, next time you decide to park your ship, maybe avoid my fence. It's the only thing keeping coyotes out. She looked puzzled. Coyotes? Predators, I explained. Teeth, fur, run fast, eat anything. Her eyes lit up, suddenly amused. Ah, like your politicians. I stared. Wow, you pick up sarcasm fast. I read minds, she said dryly. I froze halfway through a laugh, trying to figure out if she was serious. Then she smirked. Joking, mostly. The sun dipped low outside, painting the desert gold. She followed the light through the window, expression softening for the first time. So this is your world, she said quietly. Hot, harsh, beautiful. Yeah, I said, watching her more than the view. That about sums it up. She turned back to me, eyes thoughtful. You helped me, why? Because you asked, I said simply. And because you crash-landed 5 feet from my toolbox. Seemed rude not to. Her smile this time was real. Warm, curious, and slightly mischievous. Perhaps your species is not as barbaric as our archives claim. Oh, we're definitely barbaric, I said. We just hide it behind customer service. That earned me another laugh. Then suddenly serious again, she said, Kyle, if my pursuers followed me here, your territory may not be safe. Pursuers? She nodded. I escaped. Someone who doesn't accept no gracefully. Well, I said, glancing around my cluttered shop. He's welcome to trip over 3 lawnmowers and a broken drone if he tries anything. Thyra tilted her head. You would defend me? Of course. You crash-landed in my yard. That makes you under my jurisdiction. Also, I'm still holding your arm brace, so technically I'm winning. Her lips twitched again. Strange logic. I like it. Outside the wind shifted, carrying the scent of ozone and the distant whine of engines. Thyra's eyes narrowed. They found me. I grabbed my wrench, which in my defense was the closest thing to a weapon I owned. Guess we're skipping the welcome party. She rose gracefully, energy pulsing through her veins once more, the air around her vibrating faintly. Kyle, she said, if I do not survive, remember this. You are braver than you look. And you, I said, are weirder than most house guests. She actually smiled. Even as light began to gather around her hands, the last thing I remember before the ground shook was her turning to me and whispering, Stay behind me, human. And maybe afterward, I'll teach you how to flirt properly. The horizon glowed faint red as something big descended through the evening haze. You didn't need binoculars to know it wasn't friendly. The engine screamed like angry thunder. Sand lifted in rolling waves, rattling the scrap heaps around my workshop. Pursuers, Thyra said flatly. 4 hunters, Class 9 speed interceptors. I squinted. Class 9? That's bad, right? Very. She touched a console on her wrist, but it sparked and died. And my shields are offline. Perfect, I muttered. Just how I like my Tuesday nights, explosions and mysterious aliens. She gave me a look. Humor in crisis? Interesting survival instinct. Better than crying, I said. Okay, what exactly are they after, you? Or the fancy fireworks you came with? Both, she said, moving toward the window. They want the data core I stole. Evidence of treason in the Vanguard Council. I thought I could reach your planet's neutral zone before they found me. Well, I said, hefting my wrench. You made it halfway. That counts for something. A blinding streak of light slammed into the ground a few 100 meters away. Sand erupted in every direction. The roof groaned. Thyra braced herself, scanning the skies. They will send drones first. Great, I said. Because I've got exactly 0 anti-drone weapons. You have machines, she said quickly. The metal beasts outside. What are they? My scrap loaders? They're broken. Her silver eyes flared. Then fix them. I can't fix everything in 5 minutes. Then improvise. That word, spoken with alien authority, always meant trouble. Within 10 minutes, my scrapyard looked like a cross between a junk festival and a very confused armory. I jury-rigged 2 loaders with power cells, duct-taped my generator to a plasma coil, and given each machine a personality crisis. Thyra crouched beside me, her damaged armor patched with an old leather jacket I'd thrown at her. She looked absurdly regal in it. You humans fight with chaos, she said, adjusting the sleeve. It's inspiring. Yeah, I said. Chaos is my brand. A metallic whine rose overhead. 3 black drones swept into view, wings flashing like knives in the moonlight. Those are not friendly, I said. Then let's greet them rudely. She pressed her palm against the nearest loader. Blue energy rippled through the machine, fusing circuits that hadn't worked since before I was born. The loader's eyes flickered to life, 2 dull bulbs suddenly glowing bright. You can do that? I asked. She smiled faintly. I can do many things when someone lends me power. I didn't know if she meant the generator or me, but my stomach flipped anyway. Okay, Iron Giant, I muttered to the loader. Let's earn your second chance. The drones fired first. Bright plasma shots tore through the air, slamming into piles of scrap metal. Sparks flew. I dove behind a rusted engine block. Thyra didn't even flinch. She raised her hand and the air bent, deflecting another blast like it had hit invisible glass. Energy shield, she said. Short range, useful trick, I shouted. You got one that makes dinner too? She smirked. Later, perhaps. I hit the loader's ignition. The machine roared to life, lumbering forward and hurling an old satellite dish straight into a drone. It hit squarely, sending the drone spinning into the dirt. Direct hit! I whooped. Thyra gave me a sideways glance. Primitive weapons, excellent aim, thanks. Years of throwing tools at malfunctioning engines. The other two drones swooped lower. Thyra extended her arm, concentrating. Her armor's remaining plates flared blue. Energy gathered in her palm, then sputtered out in a sad puff of smoke. Out of charge, she growled. I ran for the generator, grabbing 2 power cables. Can you recharge through contact? Yes, why? I handed her the cables, because that's all I've got. Don't bite them. She hesitated only a second before pressing both cables to her bracer. Electricity surged. Her hair lifted slightly, glowing. For a moment, she looked like a living storm. That will suffice, she said. She turned, lifted her hand again, and fired a bolt of energy straight into the last drone. It exploded in a spectacular ball of blue flame that lit the desert like daylight. When the noise faded, I realized I was grinning like an idiot. Not bad for teamwork, I said. She exhaled slowly. You adapt quickly. Well, when my choices are adapt or explode, I try to adapt. The silence that followed felt strange after all that chaos. The desert shimmered, still smoking in places. One of my loaders wheezed its final breath and collapsed into a heap. Rest in peace, buddy, I said. You died doing something stupid. My favorite way to go, Thyra looked at me curiously. You mourn machines? Only the ones that cooperate. She gave a small, genuine laugh. You are unlike any soldier I have met. I'm not a soldier, I said, brushing dust off my jacket. I fix things, usually badly, yet you fight, because you dragged trouble to my door. Her eyes softened. Then perhaps I owe you more than a thank you. There it was again. That strange mix of sincerity and teasing that made my brain short-circuit. You could start by not blowing up my yard again. I said, I will try. We began clearing the debris. The smell of ozone faded into the crisp scent of desert night. For a while, the only sounds were our footsteps and the occasional hiss of cooling metal. When she spoke again, her tone was quieter. Kyle, I wasn't joking earlier. They will send more. Bigger ships. They will not stop until the data core is destroyed. Or I am. I leaned on a broken panel, trying to sound calmer than I felt. So we hide then. You would risk hiding me? Why not? You already wrecked the place. Hard to get worse. She actually looked startled. You speak lightly, but your loyalty is touching. I'm just stubborn. Her gaze lingered on me a moment longer than was comfortable. On my world, that is a valued trait in a partner. I coughed. Good to know. Before I could think of a witty follow-up, a sharp beep echoed from her wrist device. She frowned, tapping it. Signal trace. They are triangulating. We must move. Move where? You saw my ride. It's got 3 tires and one of them's philosophical about rolling. Thyra studied the landscape, then pointed toward the rocky ridge north of the yard. Caves, natural shielding. We can hide there until sunrise. Sure, I said. Because hiking through alien-infested desert at night is my idea of cardio, she smiled. Your sarcasm grows stronger. Soon you will be fluent. Lead the way, teacher. We left the yard under the light of 2 moons. Hers, not mine. Or maybe just reflections of her still glowing armor. She moved like she belonged out there, graceful, silent, somehow untouchable. I trudged behind, kicking rocks and muttering about sand in my boots. After an hour, we reached the caves. Cool air washed over us. She collapsed against a wall, exhausted but still somehow regal. I dropped beside her, out of breath, For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "You risked much tonight." "I risked my generator, my loader, and probably my health insurance," I said. "But yeah, worth it." She turned her head slightly toward me. "Why?" "Because you asked for help." Her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe something else. "On my world, asking for help is seen as weakness." "Then your world sounds exhausting." She laughed quietly. Perhaps that is why I left. We sat in the dim light, the night wind whistling outside. Something about the silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It felt steady. "You humans," she said, "you joke even when death approaches." "It is strange." "Yeah," I said. "But laughing beats screaming." She nodded slowly. "Then laugh with me, Kale. I can manage that." For the first time since she'd fallen from the sky, she looked at peace. Her armor dimmed, her breathing steadied. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the stars peeking through the cave mouth. Tomorrow would probably bring more trouble. More pursuers, more insanity. But right now, there was just the quiet rhythm of her voice and the faint hum of her alien heartbeat echoing in the dark. And somehow that was enough. The morning light on this part of the wasteland was a pale blue shimmer, like sunlight diffused through glass. Kale never got used to how alien dawns looked out here, where the sky still carried traces of ion storms. He stepped outside the bunker with a mug of something that might have been coffee if it didn't hiss at him every third sip. Inside, he heard Thyra humming softly. It was low, melodic, and oddly mechanical, each note almost harmonic with the whine of the power cells charging. For an alien queen, she had an oddly domestic streak. She'd spent the early hours calibrating his broken machinery, cursing in languages that sounded like radio interference. "Human," she called from inside. "Your wrench is, how do you call it?" "Emotionally compromised," he chuckled. "You mean broken?" "No, it made a squeak noise when I picked it up. It sounded like sadness." "That's rust, Thyra." She appeared in the doorway wearing his oversized jacket again, sleeves rolled so high they practically reached her elbows. "Ah, rust. Yes, the human disease that affects metal." "How tragic." Kale took a sip from his cup. "You know you're getting better at sarcasm." She looked smug. "I study the master," he groaned. "That's definitely sarcasm." "It is also admiration," she added quickly. "Do not ruin it." The awkward compliment hung between them, carried by the wind. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she stepped forward and pointed toward the valley. "The drones will search this area by nightfall. We must leave." "Right," Kale said. "Just give me an hour to pack." Thyra was already dismantling his energy rifle. "You mean this?" He blinked. "That's not how you pack it. This part is inefficient. And this coil, look at it. It's bent like a toddler's drawing." Kyle sighed. "You just called my rifle a piece of modern art." She smiled faintly. "Art is subjective." He watched her work for a while. She moved with mechanical precision, yet there was something strangely graceful in the way her hands flowed across the weapon, like a craftsman sculpting rather than repairing. Her hair caught the blue light, glinting faintly metallic. He found himself staring. "You are staring," she said, without looking up. "I'm analyzing your technique." "That is also subjective," she replied, snapping the reassembled rifle shut with a click. "Done. More efficient by 23%. Kyle blinked. "You just improved a human rifle with alien parts?" "Yes. You are welcome." Then she added dryly, "Do not break it emotionally again." He nearly choked on his coffee laughing. They left the bunker by midday, riding an old hover hauler that wheezed louder than both of them combined. The road stretched endlessly, a glittering desert of glass and rust. Thyra sat beside him in the passenger seat, head tilted toward the open sky. "Where do humans go when they flee?" she asked. "Usually somewhere worse," Kale said. "That's the human condition. Running from bad to slightly less bad." Thyra nodded solemnly. "That is very poetic. Also very stupid," he smirked. "That's humanity in 2 words." She turned to him, her expression softening. "And yet, you still fight, you hide. You rebuild, why?" Kale kept his eyes on the horizon. "Because if we stop, there's nothing left to be human for." For a moment, neither said anything. The silence wasn't heavy. It was curious, thoughtful. The kind of silence that made space feel a little less empty. Then, of course, the hauler exploded. Well, technically, it spluttered, wobbled, and fell apart in a way that might as well have been an explosion. The right thruster puffed black smoke. The stabilizer screamed. The vehicle spun half a turn before nose-planting into a sandbank. Thyra, perfectly calm, folded her arms. "You were saying something about efficiency?" Cale coughed, brushing glass dust off his jacket. "That's not on me. This thing's older than most civilizations." She arched an eyebrow. "So is your humor." "Fair." They climbed out and surveyed the damage. The hauler was beyond repair. Its fuel cell cracked, its navigation AI fried. Thyra looked around the wasteland. "We will have to walk." "Yeah," Cale said. "Toward the cliffs. There's an old relay tower there. If I can get it running, we can boost a signal, maybe call for a ship." Thyra tilted her head. "You still have allies?" "Not many," he admitted, "but enough. She seemed to consider that." "Then let us go, human, before the desert decides to eat us." Comforting, they started walking. Hours passed under the bruised purple sky. Cale found himself oddly enjoying her company. For someone who once ruled a star system, she was remarkably talkative about the mundane. She asked him what dating meant, then why humans needed sleep, then whether movies were a form of propaganda. When he tried to explain romantic comedies, she was completely baffled. "So," Thyra said, frowning, "you enjoy stories about two people who are emotionally incompatible until they are not?" "Exactly. That is, either genius or psychological warfare," he laughed. "Both, honestly," she nodded solemnly. "You humans truly are complex creatures." A moment later, she added in mock seriousness, "In my empire, we called that courtship combat." Cale chuckled. "Sounds about right." They were halfway through another round of verbal sparring when the sky flickered. A metallic shape appeared on the horizon, sleek, angular, unmistakably alien. Thyra froze. "Pursuers," Kyle squinted. "How many?" "2 scout skiffs, fast, armed." "Fantastic," he muttered. "Can we hide?" She shook her head. "They will sense our biosignatures, unless—" Her eyes darted to the relay tower, now visible as a silhouette against the dunes. "If we reach it, we can overload its core. The pulse will blind their sensors." Cale stared at her. "Overload? As in make it explode?" "Yes. You're terrifying when you're practical. I am efficient." They started running. The wind cut across the glass plains like knives. The skiffs were closing fast, twin streaks of crimson light slashing the air. Cale's lungs burned as they scrambled up the slope toward the tower. Thyra moved like gravity was optional, sprinting ahead, her cloak flickering with faint luminescent threads. She turned back once to yell, "Faster, human!" "I'm trying not to die." "That is the spirit." By the time they reached the base of the tower, the air crackled with energy. Cale threw open the access panel, cursing at the age of the machinery. Thyra's hands blurred through the wiring. Sparks flew. The skiff screamed overhead. Cale yelled over the wind, "Tell me this plan doesn't involve us inside the explosion." She didn't answer, just yanked a glowing module from the core. "There now!" He grabbed her hand instinctively as they dove behind a ridge. The world went white. A moment later, the shockwave hit, a thunderous boom that knocked them flat, sent sand and static washing over everything. When the noise faded, all that remained of the tower was a smoking crater. Kyle groaned. "You call that efficient?" Thyra, still holding his hand, exhaled. "We are alive. Therefore, yes." He looked at her, half laughing, half disbelieving. "You're insane." "Thank you," she said softly. That night, they made camp among the wreckage. The sky shimmered with dust and lightning, like the universe was applauding their near-death performance. Kyle leaned back against a metal plate, exhausted. "You know," he said, "I used to think humans had the monopoly on chaos." Thyra smirked. "You were wrong. We invented it first," he smiled faintly. "Of course you did." For a long while they sat in silence again, watching the stars. The distance between them felt smaller now, less like two species, more like two people caught in the same storm. Finally, Kyle said, "You never told me why you ran." Thyra's expression flickered, something unreadable behind her usual confidence. Because I did not want to be a queen anymore. He raised an eyebrow. That's it? She nodded slowly. Power is heavy, human. Heavier than armor. Kyle considered that. Then maybe running was the smartest thing you ever did. Thyra looked at him, really looked, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Perhaps. Or perhaps meeting you was. The words caught him off guard. For once he didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He just smiled. And somewhere between the broken stars and the quiet desert, laughter, small, unguarded, and human, rose into the alien night. By the next day, the desert had changed colors again, soft amber instead of blue. Cale wondered if it was the light or if the world itself couldn't decide what mood to be in. Either way, he was grateful for the quiet. The last 24 hours had been a blur of running, shouting, and surviving explosions that would make a demolition crew blush. Now, for once, there was only the hum of cooling metal and the rhythmic click of Thyra's claws as she tinkered with a melted data core. Kyle sat across from her, patching a tear in his jacket with tape. You ever realize how most of our plans start with run and end with boom? Thyra didn't look up. It is a statistically proven pattern in our partnership. Partnership, huh? He raised an eyebrow. That's new. Would you prefer chaotic alliance of questionable survival odds? Yeah, that sounds more like us. She smiled faintly, the corner of her mouth curving in that half-mocking way he was starting to recognize as affection disguised as arrogance. You enjoy this, she said. What? The chaos. The danger. The improvisation. You act like you complain, but you would be bored without it. He snorted. I'd be fine with a little boredom. Thyra gave him a sideways glance. Lies. He couldn't help but grin. Okay, maybe a little chaos keeps me awake. She nodded, returning to her work. And alive. A gust of wind carried fine shards of sand over the campfire, and for a moment, Kyle thought of Earth, of old forests, oceans, things that didn't hum like machines or glow with radiation. He hadn't thought about home in years, maybe because home was just a word now. Thyra noticed him staring into the fire. You are thinking about something distant. Yeah, he said quietly. About what's left of where I came from. She tilted her head. Is it still there? Physically? Maybe, spiritually? Nah, we kind of broke it. She considered that, her voice soft. Humans seem to break what they love often. He looked up at her. You say that like you've never done the same. Her hands froze above the circuit board. Perhaps I have. There it was again, that tiny crack in her composure. The queen, stripped of her armor and titles, suddenly looked human in the strangest way. Tired, burdened, almost fragile. Kyle didn't press. He just said, you fixed my rifle. You can fix the universe next. That earned a quiet laugh from her. One thing at a time. Later, as the sun dipped below the dunes, they climbed to the top of the wreckage to scan the horizon. Kyle adjusted the battered scope. No sign of your hunters. Thyra stood beside him, the wind tugging at her cloak. They will come again. My empire does not forgive deserters. Then we keep running. She gave him a look, something between disbelief and gratitude. You would keep running with me? Running's my specialty, her voice softened. Humans are strange, he chuckled. That's our brand. They watched the horizon in silence for a while. The glass dunes reflected the last light like liquid fire. Then Thyra said quietly, do you ever tire of being brave? He thought about that for a long moment. All the time. But I figure if I stop pretending to be brave, I might forget how. She nodded slowly, almost solemnly. Pretending, yes? I understand that. There was something in her tone that made him glance at her again. You really didn't want to be queen, did you? No, she said simply. But wanting and escaping are not the same. He waited, sensing there was more. She hesitated, then spoke, words deliberate. My people worship strength. They call it purity. But strength without mercy is just cruelty wearing armor. Kyle met her gaze. And you didn't want to wear that armor anymore, she exhaled. Exactly, he smiled faintly. So you ran to the one planet famous for breaking every rule. I ran to nowhere, she said, voice softening. You just happened to be there. Something about that hit deeper than either of them expected. Kale laughed, awkwardly breaking the tension. Lucky coincidence. Thyra's lips curved into a small smirk. Lucky for whom, human? I'm still deciding. Night fell faster on alien worlds, as if someone just switched the sun off. Kale set up the thermal barrier, while Thyra adjusted the fire's containment field. The quiet between them was different now. Comfortable, almost easy. Then, out of nowhere, Thyra asked, when humans choose a mate, how do they decide? Kyle blinked. That's not a small question. I am not a small queen, he laughed. Okay, fair. Well, humans don't always decide. Sometimes it just happens. You meet someone, you argue, you laugh. You survive a few explosions together. So it is combat, she said. Completely serious. In a way, yeah. She nodded thoughtfully. That explains much. Much about what? Her tone was innocent. Your behavior. The constant teasing. The way you stare at me when you think I am not noticing. Kyle froze mid-sentence. I don't... Yes, you do, she smiled wickedly. Your eyes dilate. It is a biological reaction. You are not subtle. He ran a hand over his face. Great. So the alien queen can read my eyeballs. I am a fast learner. He laughed in defeat. Remind me to never play poker with you. I do not know that game. But I am confident I would win. They both laughed, loud, echoing across the wasteland, like the sound alone was keeping them alive. Later that night, when the fire had died down, Kyle found Thyra sitting at the edge of the cliff, staring at the stars. Her silhouette glowed faintly in the alien moonlight. He walked over quietly. Can't sleep? I do not require sleep the way you do. My body regenerates energy differently. Show off, she smirked. Perhaps I simply wish to look at something that is not broken. Kyle sat beside her. You're poetic when you're sad. I am accurate. They looked up at the stars, two runaways on a dying planet. Somewhere out there, her empire was still searching, still sending drones and scouts. Somewhere beyond that, Earth was probably still arguing about taxes. Do you think, Kyle said quietly, if the universe had a sense of humor, it'd put us here on purpose? Thyra turned to him. I think the universe enjoys irony. That's basically the same thing. She studied his face for a long moment, then said softly, You make me feel... Less heavy, he met her gaze. You make me forget how broken I am. They didn't speak after that. Words felt too small for the moment. The desert wind carried everything they couldn't say. By dawn, the horizon was no longer empty. A faint shimmer, metallic, moving fast, appeared in the distance. Thyra stiffened instantly. Scouts. They found us. Kyle stood grabbing his rifle. Then we move. She shook her head. No time. They will reach us before we reach cover. He checked the weapon, grinning despite the odds. Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way. Thyra drew her energy blade, its edge humming softly. You mean the human way? Yeah, he said, eyes narrowing at the incoming lights. Messy, stupid, and probably heroic. Her mouth curved into that rare smile again. Then let us be human together. And as the first drones screamed through the sky, the human and the alien queen stood side by side, ready to make the universe laugh one more time. When the first drone fired, the air itself seemed to shatter. The pulse beam sliced past Kyle's head, vaporizing a patch of glassed sand. He ducked instinctively, yelling, You ever think maybe we attract trouble? Thyra's voice cut through the static, sharp and dry. You attract it. I simply survive it. Teamwork! Kale shouted, rolling behind a chunk of fallen metal. The sky roared with light. 3 skiffs descended in formation. Sleek, predatory, with crimson insignias glowing along their hulls. The symbol of her empire burned like a cruel memory across the clouds. Thyra's expression hardened. They sent assassins. Kyle peeked over cover. You sure they're not just here to talk about your extended warranty? Humans joke in the face of death, she muttered, drawing her blade. Admirable, irritating, he grinned. Keeps me sane, she glanced sideways. Then stay sane long enough to aim straight, he smirked, powering up his rifle. Ladies first. The next few minutes were chaos in its purest cinematic form. Kale's rifle spat arcs of plasma as he ducked and fired, each shot scorching the air. Thyra moved beside him like lightning wrapped in elegance, every motion efficient, deliberate, dazzling. When she struck, the drones didn't even explode. They folded out of existence, sliced apart by energy so precise it was almost beautiful. "Remind me," Kyle yelled. "Reloading. How exactly you aren't terrifying?" "I retired," she snapped, vaulting off a shattered console and driving her blade into another drone. "This is my comm." "Good to know your comm involves explosions." The third skiff banked sharply, unleashing a hail of suppressive fire. Kale tackled her behind a fallen comms tower, just as the sand behind them turned to molten glass. They landed in a heap, his arm braced protectively around her shoulders. For a moment, there was silence, just their ragged breathing and the sizzling air. Thyra blinked up at him. "You are very forward, human," he flushed. "That was tactical proximity." She tilted her head. "Your species uses many words for hug," he groaned. "Can we maybe flirt after we don't die?" She smiled faintly. "That is the most human sentence I have ever heard." They split again as the skiff circled back. Kale climbed the wrecked tower, firing bursts to keep it off balance. Thyra sprinted through the smoke below, using the chaos to reach the fuel cells they'd scavenged earlier. "Thyra!" he shouted down. "What are you doing?" "Something efficient. That's never reassuring." She connected 2 cables and twisted the core valve open. The reactor hummed dangerously. Kyle's eyes widened. "You're turning that thing into a bomb." She looked up at him with that infuriatingly calm expression. "Do you trust me?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Unfortunately, yes." "Good," she said, pulling the trigger on the detonator. Kyle leapt from the tower as the explosion lit the horizon. The shockwave hit like a freight train, throwing him and Thyra sprawling through the sand. When the ringing finally stopped, the air was filled with the smell of ozone and burnt circuitry. The skiffs were gone, nothing left but twisted metal and the faint echo of their destruction. Kyle groaned, sitting up. "You have a real talent for making fireworks." Thyra brushed sand from her armor, utterly unbothered. "I prefer dramatic solutions. You prefer near-death experiences." "Semantics," he laughed, shaking his head. "Remind me not to let you near any more explosives." She gave him a look that said she'd already ignored that request. They limped away from the wreckage hours later, following the ridge toward a patch of green shimmer in the distance, rare signs of life. The desert eventually gave way to crystalline flora, faintly bioluminescent, glowing like bottled starlight. Kyle slowed, staring. "It's beautiful," Thyra's voice softened. "It reminds me of the gardens of Zephyra Prime before the wars." He glanced at her. "You miss it?" "Sometimes." She ran her fingers over one of the glowing leaves. "But memory is a dangerous place to live." Kyle nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know that feeling." They walked for a while in quiet until Kyle broke it with a crooked smile. "You know, if we survive this, we could start a travel show." "Runaway Queen and Human Disaster," Thyra snorted. "I assume I am the queen in this scenario." "Obviously. And you are the disaster. Born to play it." For the first time in days, she laughed, an unguarded melodic sound that made the alien forest seem brighter. Kale found himself laughing too, not because it was funny, but because it felt good to be alive. They found shelter in an old comms relay half buried in crystal vines. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, but the walls held. Kale started patching a wound on his arm while Thyra inspected the circuitry. She looked up suddenly. "Why did you save me earlier?" He blinked. "You mean during the fight?" "Yes, you could have escaped while they targeted me. Yet you did not," he frowned. "Because I don't leave people behind." Her tone softened. "Even alien queens?" "Especially alien queens?" Thyra studied him for a moment. "You are either very brave or very foolish." He smiled faintly. "Both. It's kind of a human trademark." She tilted her head, expression unreadable. "In my world, kindness was seen as weakness." "Well," Kyle said, tightening the bandage on his arm, "then your world was wrong." That silenced her. For once, she didn't have a sarcastic comeback. She just looked at him, something almost vulnerable flickering in her gaze. Then she said quietly, "Perhaps that is why I left it." Outside, thunder rolled across the alien sky. Lightning flashed blue through the crystal canopy, turning the shelter into a kaleidoscope of color. Kale leaned against the wall, watching the patterns play across her face. "You ever think," he said softly, "that maybe the universe put us here for a reason?" Thyra raised an eyebrow. "To be hunted and almost vaporized?" "To meet," he corrected. Her expression softened. "Humans always need meaning." "Yeah," he said, "and sometimes meaning looks like a sarcastic alien queen who keeps saving my life." She smiled faintly. "Flattery, human, dangerous weapon. I'm unarmed otherwise." For a moment, she didn't look like a fugitive, or a queen, or a soldier. She just looked curious, wondering what kind of creature could laugh in the face of extinction and still make jokes about it. Then she said softly, "Do not make me regret meeting you." "You already don't," he said with a grin. They sat in silence again, both pretending not to notice how their hands had drifted close enough to almost touch. The thunder rumbled again, distant now. Kyle closed his eyes. "You know what the worst part about running is?" "What?" "You start to forget what it's like to stop." She looked at him, voice barely above a whisper. "Then maybe we stop. Just for a moment." So they did. No explosions. No drones, no empire. Just two beings, surrounded by the faint glow of alien light, trying to remember what peace felt like. The storm came before sunrise. Lightning webbed across the crystalline canopy, each flash revealing the wreckage they'd left behind, a burning reminder that peace was temporary. Kale woke to the sharp whine of a scanner. Thyra was already standing at the entrance, her armor shimmering faintly under the blue light. "They found us," she said. Kyle sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Do we ever get a day off?" Apparently not. Outside, the sound grew, a low mechanical hum that made the air vibrate. Distant ships, bigger ones this time. Kale grabbed his rifle, wincing at the stiffness in his shoulder. "So what's the plan, Queen of Explosions?" Her eyes flicked toward him. "We do not run this time," he blinked. "Wait, what?" "They will not stop. Every step we take, they follow. Every planet we touch, they scar. The only way to end this is to make them believe I am dead." "That sounds like a bad idea." "It is an efficient one." Kale stood, frowning. "Thyra, you don't have to do this." She turned, her expression soft but resolute. "Yes, I do. My empire will not rest until their queen is erased." "Let them erase a ghost." He stepped closer. "You mean you just disappear?" "Yes. If I live quietly, they will move on." "Live quietly?" He laughed, incredulous. "You? The woman who sets everything on fire when she fixes it?" Her lips curved. "You exaggerate. You explode things. Efficiently." Kyle ran a hand through his hair. "There's got to be another way." She stepped closer, voice gentler now. "You are a soldier, Kale. You know sometimes survival is not the same as victory." He met her gaze. "Yeah, and I also know you don't throw away the one person who made you believe in something again." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, thunder echoing through the glass fields. Then Thyra said quietly, "Humans always make everything complicated. Only when it matters." The first ship broke through the clouds, sleek, silver, unmistakably regal. The Aegis Sovereign, the flagship of her empire. Kyle whistled low. "That's not subtle." "It was never meant to be." Thyra's tone was steady. "They want to make an example." "Not on my watch," he muttered. He started assembling the relay beacon they'd salvaged from the wreckage. She frowned. "What are you doing?" "Sending a signal." "To whom?" "To anyone still listening." Her voice rose slightly. "Kyle, if they find your coordinates, they'll find us anyway. Might as well invite a few friends." She stared at him, half exasperated, half impressed. "You are reckless." "Yeah," he said with a grin. "But I'm your kind of reckless." Minutes later, the desert lit up like a fireworks display. Plasma fire rained down from the flagship as smaller craft descended. Kale fired back, weaving through cover, yelling at the top of his lungs, You sure they're here for you and not my winning personality? Thyra replied dryly, slicing a drone in half. They are not fans of your sarcasm. Her movements were precise, graceful, royalty forged into a weapon. But there were too many. Even she was slowing. Kyle dove beside her, panting. We can't hold them forever. We do not have to, she said, pointing to the relay. Signal strength, 95%. A voice crackled through the comm. Kyle? That you? Thought you were dead, buddy. He grinned. Still working on it. Within minutes, distant shapes appeared on the horizon. Old resistance craft, battered and mismatched, but beautiful all the same. Humans. Thyra's eyes widened slightly. You called the rebels? Yeah, he said, firing again. Told you I had allies. She laughed under her breath, half disbelief, half admiration. You are impossible. And yet you're still here. The battle that followed was glorious in its chaos. Resistance ships strafed the Imperial lines while Kale and Thyra fought side by side. Every moment was a blur of fire and dust and laughter that had no right existing in the middle of a war zone. At one point, Kale shouted, We're completely outnumbered. Thyra yelled back, Then we are even. Even? They have numbers. We have insanity. Can't argue with that. The flagship finally faltered. A final surge of energy from the rebels crippled its thrusters, sending it veering into the horizon in a cascade of flame. The surviving Imperial ships scattered. The storm began to break, and just like that, the battlefield fell quiet. Kale lowered his rifle, chest heaving. That was ridiculous. Thyra's armor was scorched, her hair disheveled, but she was smiling. Ridiculous, she agreed softly. And effective, he laughed, sinking to the ground. You're welcome. You risked your life, he shrugged. You fixed my rifle. Fair trade. She gave him that look again, the one that mixed exasperation and warmth in equal measure. Humans, always making jokes when you should be proud. Oh, I'm proud, he said. Just bad at showing it. Thyra looked down at him for a long moment, then sat beside him. I should go, she said quietly. If I stay, they will keep coming. Let them, he said. We'll just blow them up again. She smiled sadly. You cannot keep fighting the universe for me. Watch me. The silence stretched. Wind swept through the broken crystals, making them hum like wind chimes. Then softly, Thyra said, If there were another life, I would have liked to live it with you. He looked at her, smiling through the ache in his chest. You don't need another life. Just this one. Her eyes glimmered faintly. You make impossible things sound easy. That's the human way. When the rebels landed, Thyra stood at the edge of the field, watching the sunrise. The light turned her silver armor gold. Kyle walked up behind her. So, he said, Queen of Nowhere. What happens next? She looked out at the horizon. Maybe I learn how to live without a throne. And maybe I teach you how to make bad coffee. She gave him a sideways glance. That sounds terrible. Exactly. For the first time in forever, she laughed. A real laugh, not the sharp, armored kind. It echoed across the quiet valley like something reborn. Kyle extended his hand. Stay, just a little longer. Thyra hesitated, then took it. Their hands fit like a treaty written in laughter and defiance. Later, as the twin suns rose, the old relay beacon flickered once more. Kale looked at it and smiled. Guess the signal's still alive. Thyra followed his gaze. Maybe it always was, he grinned. Then let's see what kind of trouble we can find next. She shook her head, smiling. You are incorrigible, and you love it. Tragically. Sometimes the universe doesn't need heroes, just two broken souls who refuse to give up on laughter. Because in every galaxy and every storm, being human still means trying anyway.